Hello, gang. Sorry. Need to do a little bit of cleanup on my iPad. A little bit. My goodness. All right. I'll be there in just 1 second. Sorry about that. High quality broadcasting. That's what you've come to expect. Hello, Eric. Good to have you on board. Sorry, I will be paying attention to you all in just a minute. All right, there we go. So this is a painting I started, maybe you know, last Saturday in Shelby, beautiful Shelby, North Carolina. And I was happy enough with it for, an evening's work. Did about as much as I could do under the circumstances. That's all right. Now, this is going to be a very short broadcast. I have at least 2 more topics to cover on this painting. One is finishing these figures, and by finishing I don't mean going to detail, okay, but making them anatomically correct but still very energetic marks and so forth. And I also have to work on both faces, and this is what I can do much better here in my studio than I could from my phone. I keep learning this lesson over and over and over. I did not capture great photographs of the bride and groom. So that has made this challenge significantly more difficult than it would have been. Anyway, I'll talk more about that later. But right now, just a short broadcast on what I call second-day glaze. So really, my painting technique has evolved so that I am, unlike in the past, I'm now completely unable to finish a wedding painting at the reception. The first 100 wedding paintings I did, I finished all of them at the reception. I don't even know how I did that now, but I did. All right, hey, let's get legal. Daily Art Adventure number 744, Second-Day Glazes. And again, a short broadcast. I'm using, as usual, my favorite medium, which is Winsor Newton GAC. I'm not even saying the right word. That's my favorite acrylic medium. Liquid Original. Good grief. There's no accounting sometimes for how the brain works, or it doesn't work. All right, so I'm going to do a glaze or glazes, whichever you prefer, over much of this painting. And I want you to witness how the painting is going to warm up and evolve over the next couple of minutes. Okay, well, let me see if that, yep, that's a color. I love doing this at the reception. And my first glaze, because of course I did a glaze, on Saturday evening as well. And my first glaze is even more dramatic or intense than this one. The second-day glaze is typically a lighter, what's the word I'm looking for? Lighter impact, not as strong a glaze. That's what I'm trying to say. As the first glaze that I do on the first day of painting is often a very strong, powerful, darker glaze. Don't be confused. That only makes sense to those of you who are really savvy, deep in your gut, which many of you do not. No, that language about a darker glaze only makes sense if you really understand the essence of glazing. And many early journey painters absolutely do not, because most were not trained, as in my opinion they should have been. Many were not trained in the art of glazing. All right, so that was Please do not take notes. Paint with your eyes, not with a notebook. That was, for what it's worth, oxide red and a little bit of Indian yellow. This is a little bit of a rag. You can write that down. So now I'm just rubbing anything that I want to be lighter. Again, removing some, though not all, of what I just put on the canvas. Anything that I want, you know, less. I just warmed it up a great deal. So anything that I want, in fact, less warmed up, I'm wiping it off. The fire I rubbed, not because I want it less warm, but because I want it lighter and brighter. Same thing is true with the candles. They're a good temperature now. They were too pale just a few seconds ago. So the first thing I want you to notice is how quick that was. And maybe there in the video, you can go back now a few minutes, especially those of you who are watching it in replay, and see the difference that made on this painting. I'm going to do just a little bit more glazing. And that brings up another point. I'm always a little bit afraid that when I use the word glaze, that people are going to infer from that the word glaze means all the same color. Okay, if that's what that word means to you, then by all means, when I say glaze, you hear plural glazes. Okay, linguistically can go either way. But anyway, it is more than one color. That is quite important. So if you'd rather call that glazes, be my guest. It doesn't bother me a bit. But this is really where it gets fun, in my opinion, where you can go in and rather surgically, so to speak. Again, that only makes sense if you really understand the essence of glazing. You do not do glazing with a brush like that. Well, you could, but no. Do you understand? No. This is you don't glaze like this. And you could, but that's not what that's not what I call glazing at all. All right, now. And I forgot to have you do anytime, especially on Second-Day Glaze. This is what you say to yourself. I like it pretty much. That is, you must say that about your painting. Yes, you must. You must say, I like it pretty much. Sorry, I'll try not to get on a rant. Many of you who are early journey painters, if you have any hope of getting out of early journey, you must stop slapping yourself down. You must stop self-flagellation. You must stop cursing yourself. Here's what many of you say. I won't say most, many early journey painters. I don't really like it very much. Well, it's very good. Cut out all that crap. Just stop. To think it is one thing. To say it is way worse. So if you can't control what you're thinking, you can at least control what you're saying. Okay, so you must say, I like it pretty much. And then, but I wish it was more blank. Not more good or more better. No. The blank is a color. I wish it was more blank. Okay, so what I would have said, if I had remembered to do that here, I would have said, I like it pretty much, which in fact I actually do. But I wish it was warmer, and I wish the blue was more intense. So really, I wish the whole thing was more intense. That's what I've already accomplished to a significant degree. Right at the moment, I've got permanent rows, so I'm making areas redder. I over-enunciated that word for you, didn't I? Redder, not to be confused with redder. Well, I guess I was afraid that the word redder wouldn't. Okay, now a little bit of dioxazine violet. By the way, I am incidentally here giving you a great primer class, clinic, on how to paint white stuff. In a word, it's use anything but white paint, except for the very, very, very last layer, and the last layer is very sparse. But paint it white and then glaze it and paint it white again, and I don't mean pure white. But anyway, that's all I'm going to say about that. I don't want to get into great detail there today. Now, just a little bit of fine removing here. I got blue on my candles, and I don't really want that. So go back and clean those candle flames up. I don't want them appearing bluish. All right, so there you go. Now, I guess a little bit more light. I did blue up here in this window. Now it's a little too dark, so I'm just lightening it a little bit. I also got blue on these faces that I don't really care for too much. A little bit's okay, not as much as is there. So that's really it. I could stop the broadcast right there. That is the second-day glaze, although I will not stop. I'll keep going a little ways, because anytime that you put dark paint on the canvas, you're not finished. Dark paint is always the wind-up. The follow-through is light paint. You always, darks first, lights last is a sort of a universal process, how to paint. So there are only little bits here and there that call for light. For instance, I'm going to start up here in the window again. I'm trying to mix up some very pale, warm blue, very much like what's already there, but just one tick lighter. Whatever a tick means, right? I use that sort of measurement all the time. One tick, just a tiny bit lighter. Let me look at that. Yeah, that's all right. That's all right. We, human beings, we like to see light paint on top of, this has nothing to do with watercolor, okay? Completely different world. In oil and acrylic, we like to see light paint on top of dark paint. We do not like to see dark paint on top of light paint. Again, that's nothing to do with watercolor, as you can see. That's an absurd statement in watercolor world. But in acrylic and oil, sometimes when I say these, not very often, but every once in a while when I say these things, I can hear, especially those of you who are, in my opinion, overly enamored with the academic culture, might say something to me like, who says? Who taught you that? Where'd you learn that? Who'd you learn that from? Okay. I think it's partly full disclosure. I teach, of course, a lot of things that I learned from others, but I also teach a lot of things that nobody taught me. I just learned the hard way. Well, how can you say that if you're the only one who teaches that? How do you know you're right? I don't know. Call it a gift. Some of us are pioneers, others are conduits, followers, settlers. I'm a pioneer. Didn't choose to be, didn't want to be, didn't set out to be. It's just a recognition of who and what I am. So don't ask me, well, what professor did you learn that from? No, I am the professor. Then how do you know it's true? Because I paint with my eyes, not with principles. Now I'm stating principles all the time. The principle is the human eye likes to see light paint on top of dark paint, not vice versa. That's the principle. And yes, now that you know the principle, you should follow it. Every rule, every principle can be broken, of course, but if you don't know the principles, you're probably just screwing up. All right, so why is it that I know that principle? It's again because of my eyes, not because of some lesson that I learned somewhere, some teacher. All right, I hope that's not too... Enough about you, let's talk about me now, right? I hope that's not too self-focused, but I guess I want to be clear. Some of you might say, what do you mean? I've never heard that. Never heard any other teacher say that. I say, welcome to my broadcast. You'll hear a lot of things that nobody else. I didn't set out to be a pioneer. I'm not trying to be a pioneer. I don't take pride in being a pioneer. That's just who I am. That's all. So after glazing, which of course darkens. Glazing is always transparent. Oh boy, I hate to say those words because that is so obvious. If you don't understand that, then go back to glazing 101. Glazing is like the word glass, transparent like colored glass. Always. There's not a speck of white paint or yellow ochre in a glaze, because those things are not transparent. I'm going to work on the figures later. Really looking at big stuff right now. Is there anything that calls for some light right now, that wants to be lighter? Looking at overall composition. I'm not thinking, again, for you early journey painters, for you first half of art painters, first half of art journey painters. I'm not trying to, I'm not copying. I don't have a photograph in front of me. I'm not in the business of rendering or copying. I am in the business of creating. So the decisions I'm making now are not decisions based on what will make this scene more photographic. You understand? That's not the inner dialogue at all going on in my head. I mean, there are stages at which, please understand, there's many stages at which, like when I work on their faces, what can I do to make their faces more accurate? Absolutely, I will do that. But that is not what I'm doing right now. What I'm doing right now is asking myself the question, what can I do to make the painting better? Which means I'm thinking about issues like composition, play of light, color, texture, and so forth. And of course, the big decisions are already made, of course, so I'm just doing little things. For instance, I'll zoom in here for a minute. I've been working on the fireplace for several minutes. One of the last things I did before I did the glaze was I did some wild and crazy pencil, black pencil, all over, and you can still see bits of it right down here. And again, that's one of my idiosyncrasies, a syncrasy the idiots have. One of my idiosyncrasies is that, of course, that I use a pencil, black pencil in my painting. Well, other colors too, but mostly black. And I like it just fine. It's just not a very pleasant final layer. Does that make sense? So as long as I come in after the pencil and paint either on top of it, on top of some of those marks, or more typically adjacent to some of those pencil marks. And again, those pencil marks, let me zoom up here for a minute. I don't know if you hear, I'm going to bring you in real close just for a minute, okay? Hang on. All right, there you go. You see these lines right here? 1, 2, 3, there's two real close together. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, since I've drawn your attention to that, then let's go ahead and go with it for a minute then. Those are completely arbitrary, abstract, have nothing whatsoever to do with the pursuit of photographic realism. They're purely arbitrary. Watch this. Now this, what I'm doing right now, you can copy me in this if you want to, but this is, I said before, this is one of the most, I would have to say, one of the most idiosyncratic, that means a little bit of static there, let me fix that there. This is one of the most Dan Nelson-ish things that I do. Again, I'm not trying to be weird. This is, I started doing this years ago and then realized, oh, I do that a lot. That's typical of me. I like it. So I just painted up to both sides of that line. So a few minutes ago, that pencil line was completely abstract in the sense that it was not there in service of realism. It was not there because, because there were cobwebs hanging from the ceiling in the ballroom or something like that, or electrical wires or shadows. No, it has absolutely nothing to do with the pursuit of accurate photographic realism. You understand that, right? But they were there nonetheless. The lines were there. And now, not only have I not diminished them, I've actually, I'm going to do the same thing over here. I've actually reinforced them slightly by painting up to both sides of that. Now, why this looks good, I almost want to say beats me, except that it doesn't beat me. I think I do have some hints about why I like this look. Hints. I'm not claiming to know the whole thing, but it has something to do with the pencil lines when they're on top, when they're the last layer. And by the way, I will very typically do what I do there and cover up some of the pencil line, break it with the, in this case, translucent paint, so it's almost covered up. Likewise, you can break it there. When the pencil line is on top of the painting, your brain almost goes, I wonder if you did that on purpose. Almost looks like kind of like a mistake. But when I paint around it, when I accentuate it, then I feel like, and again, forgive me for the almost metaphysical language, because that's, of course, when we're an artist, that's really what we're dealing with to a large extent, is mysteries of beauty, mysteries of art, and so forth. When I paint around those lines, forgive me, I didn't know this was going to be a clinic on these particular lines, but here we go. When I paint around them, then the viewer, you or me, when I come back the next day, the viewer then sees those lines and perceives that not only have they been randomly drawn on the canvas, but they've been very non-randomly painted around. In other words, what I'm doing right now, the marks that I'm making right now, which are somewhat careful, and your mind picks that up. You can tell that these are painted, and the lines that the paint that I'm putting right now is applied in a fairly careful manner. Do you understand? That's part of a bigger subject I'll just touch on for a second. Every move we make leaves an indelible history on the canvas. That is, a viewer can see what we did. All right? I mean, in a way that's so obvious. So when the viewer suddenly sees this high degree of intentionality, again, in these marks, I think that their innards, their soul, so to speak, their thinking, feeling, intuitive, inner human self relaxes, just like I just did when I took a breath. Relaxes and goes, oh, wow. It's not an accident. He really did that on purpose, so much so that and I've painted around it with interesting marks. And again, this is standing out a little bit too much, so I'm just going to diminish that a little bit. So as I use the terminology I used a minute ago, so our soul, forgive me for using, scary quasi-spiritual language for some of you. Try not to be triggered. Our soul rests, says, oh, wow, okay. And then in that rested state, see, in that relaxed condition, the seeing part of your brain is freed to enjoy abstract marks. Okay? If you think it's a mistake, if you suspect, usually pronounced suspect. No, if you suspect that the marks are an accident or not very clearly thought out, then that's irritating to you. Am I making sense? But if your mind discerns, and it's very subconscious, I don't expect any non-artist to walk up to any of my paintings and say, my mind discerns that he did that on purpose. No. I know I say this all the time. All the things that I'm saying are things that artists are supposed to know and non-artists aren't even supposed to be aware of, right? But if the mind says, oh, he did that on purpose, then they relax and are then free in their soul. Again, forgive me for the quasi-sounding spiritual language. Try not to be triggered, you naturalists. Then the soul is freed, released, open, relaxed to experience pure visual pleasure. Let me back up now. Boy, I've got myself more philosophical than I'd intended to. But let me communicate for you, since I've gotten this deep in. So what is the opposite of pure visual pleasure? Well, there are two opposites that come to my mind. There may be more, but two that come to my mind immediately. One is the kind of vision employed, utilized, pursued very often in the halls of academia in the last century, in modern, what again, I'm not speaking as an academic here, I'm speaking like an ordinary person, what an ordinary person calls modern art. Okay, so most modern artists are not pursuing visual pleasure. They are instead trying to communicate a socio-political message. Okay, so but there's another much closer to home. Like what else, I used the term visual pleasure a few minutes ago. Pure visual pleasure. What is another alternative to that? Well, here it is. It is industrial pleasure. And that's what you get from a super realistic or a very realistic painting. You get what I often call an industrial buzz. You do get a form of pleasure. Your brain goes, and of course I use the word brain interchangeably with mind. I usually actually mean your mind. Your mind goes, wow, look at that. That is amazing. That's how you feel, and it is a kind of pleasure. Again, all of the art professors in all the universities of the 20th century, notwithstanding, who declare that all realism does not create pleasure, they're wrong. They're collectively wrong. They're a bunch of sheep, and they all just imitated each other. Clement Greenberg and company. Now, people do get they do experience pleasure when they witness realism that a human being has rendered or achieved. Whew, boy, am I getting deep. But pure visual pleasure is not, oh my God, that looks just like a photograph. We're impressed by the industry of the artist. So I call that an industrial buzz. In the modern art world, we look at a modern art painting and we go, oh my God, save the whales, you know, stop misogyny, you know, whatever political message the artist, or, and very often the political message is a message directed against the traditional art community, not in an antagonistic way, but as like, traditional art is so stupid. All you people that are smart, what you now like is ugly art. Anyway, I'm sorry, I'm getting way too deep. I've been writing a book on that subject for at least 10 years, and it's 400 pages long, in desperate need of editing. But we'll see. We'll see if that book ever sees the light of day or not. Maybe when I die, if I don't have it finished, I'll just pass all my notes on digitally onto my wife or somebody and say, here, release these on the public. We's the secret weapon. So I just spent quite a bit of time lightening that blue and lightening that blue. So pure visual pleasure. That's another way, by the way, of describing the second half of the art journey. Let me first half of art journey, here's what I usually say. You old timers can repeat this with me. First half of art journey, we are learning to paint stuff that looks like stuff, right? Second half of art journey, we are learning to paint stuff that looks like paint. Now, let me say the same thing in different words related to what I've been talking about the last 20 minutes. First half of art journey, you're focused on industrial pleasure. That is to say, and it's a strange term, bear with me, what I mean by that, the viewer is impressed by your industry, your time, the work, your ability to focus, your attention to detail. When you do hyper-realistic or very realistic art, people are very impressed, and rightly so, very impressed with your ability to act like a camera, okay? The second half of art journey, things change radically. Second half, you're pursuing, this is what I've never said it this exact way before, so you regulars, listen up. Second half of art journey, instead of industrial pleasure, you have shifted your focus to pure visual pleasure. Now, if you hear in that means you can enjoy completely abstract or non-objective art, then you are hearing me correctly. Yes, that is correct. The second half of art journey, which many people never get to the second half. They never escape the first half. The second half of art journey is all about pure abstract visual pleasure. Now, why do I think that that's superior? And I do. Why do I think that that is superior to the first half of realism? Here's part of the reason. Because tastes and styles will change. Tastes and styles of realism will change. What looks like a pretty picture of an autumn day and a path around over a stream, under trees, the taste for that will change over the next 1,000 years, say, if human beings last so long, which I absolutely believe they will. The taste for that will change. But in 1,000 years, if human beings still last so long, which I think they will, a human being's response to orange brown texture next to brownish, the way those two textures and colors abut each other, and there's a hard and soft edge in between. In other words, pure abstract elements. Human beings will always respond the same way to that. Now, I know. Anyway, that's as far as I want to go with that, because, again, I could be triggering some of you, and some of you either, some of you quantum physicists, and I know just enough about that to be dangerous. I'm not ignorant of many of those principles. But anyway, let's go on. Back to painting. I just stretched all the candle flames. They're not as realistic as they were, but they're more fun to look at. Okay, so the first half of our journey, you're aiming for an industrial buzz. Strange terminology, but I've defined it twice. Second half of our journey, you're aiming at pure visual pleasure. So how to get on that? Because I was talking about these lines over here. For instance, these pencil lines that you saw me paint up next to it so that the person who sees it goes, huh, whatever that is, obviously he did it on purpose. And then their inner psychological mind relaxes because they don't feel like they're seeing a mistake. They feel like they're witnessing intentionality. And then they go, oh, well, I don't know what that means, but whatever it is, he sure did it on purpose because he actually painted around it. Does that make sense? I have an analogy that have used quite often over the years. If you and I go to a concert, especially a concert maybe that is being performed by some amateurs, like a church concert or a community band concert or something like that, at a festival or some such thing. And if somebody gets up and starts singing and they're not very good, admit it, you and I have been there. And it's not just amateurs, of course, but it's a good example. And someone starts singing and they're not very good. How do you feel? Now, I don't know, maybe you're just so callous you don't even care one bit, but I think normal human beings, inside we kind of go, ouch, that note was a little flat. Unless you're not a musician, you don't know why you don't like what you hear, but you just know it does. That person A doesn't sound as good as person B, or vice versa. Okay, so your inner psyche, mind, soul, emotional person kind of squeezes up a little bit. And that's what I'm saying. If the viewer feels like they're seeing a mistake on the canvas, they go, I'm not sure the person meant to do that. Whereas if they relax and say, oh no, I'm not sure what he's doing there, but everything he did is on purpose. For instance, I think that's the way we feel when we look at a Vincent van Gogh painting. Van Gogh, for you Europeans. You're correct, of course, but in America we call him Van Gogh. When we look at a Van Gogh painting, it's like, man, it's crazy. I'm not sure what he's doing there, but doggone, it sure does look like he did it on purpose. So we relax and then, in a sense, receive easily, freely, whatever it is he's trying to do. We're no longer second guessing, editing, fixing the mistakes. It's not like a bad singer. We don't look at a Van Gogh painting and go, oh, I wish he hadn't done that. At least, I don't think we do. Most of us don't. Because whatever he was doing, it sure looks like he was doing it on purpose, which I believe he was. I love Van Gogh. But he's very unusual, right? Because he's not realism really at all. I don't even know what to call what he does. I'm sure there's a name for it, but whatever the name they put on it, I don't guarantee you I don't like it. Because it sort of, his work defies categorization. All right, well, that was a long detour, wasn't it? Somebody out there needed to hear that today. And again, I'm still sort of harping on this thing that I harp on so often about the difference between first and second half of Art Journey, and why I want more and more and more artists to make the jump to hyperspeed. Sorry, I was watching Netflix. My wife was not home last night. I was practicing my trumpet. Often when I'm practicing my trumpet in the bedroom, I'll turn on something, and I watched the beginning of Spaceballs. I'm sorry. This is such an intellectually stimulating broadcast, is it not? And for me to make reference to Spaceballs is just beneath me. But anyway, the jump to ludicrous speed. Oh, stupid Mel Brooks. I feel guilty. I feel like an idiot for laughing at a Mel Brooks movie. I really do. Anyway, the jump, which many do not make, to the second half of the art journey, and I want them to. Hey, speaking of soul, my soul is. I have an ouch in me this morning. I'm not kidding. And let me say this very carefully, because I'm not here to criticize other people per se, but should I say this or not? Oh, I guess. So I was, again, practicing my trumpet last night, and my grandchildren came in the front door while I had just switched. There was I was watching a series of YouTube videos of people painting. We ended up watching, with my grandchildren, we ended up watching Bob Ross. Okay, hang on just a second. Interrupt that story. ADD. Right here, the fireplace, front of fireplace, side of fireplace, right? And a little bit of completely lost edge. Now, many of you, you're familiar with that term, lost edge, right? In other words, right there, there's no edge, there's no demarcation between the fireplace and the wall here beside the fireplace. That's called the lost edge. You've all heard that term. Why is it that human beings, generally speaking, yes, do get a visual kick out of, quote unquote, a lost edge? It's not just a trick out there all by itself alone. The reason is because that's purely abstract. That has nothing to do with realism per se. Again, unless you're talking like Monet realism, which we're not. That has nothing to do with realism. But it tickles our brain. That's pure visual. All right, so I want to mention that real quickly. What is it about lost edges? It's abstraction, and our brains get a kick out of it. All right? So I was watching people paint on YouTube, and I came across this young man. I forget his name. I wouldn't tell you his name even if I remembered it. But he had, as you can imagine, much to my chagrin, he had viewership that just utterly embarrasses me. He just had tens of thousands of views for every painting video that he had. And he had, I think, 250,000 subscribers. So, okay, so listen to me. This is a little bit of sour grapes. I'm being facetious, I hope. I hope it's really not sour grapes. But if you knew who I was talking about, I'm not going to, there's plenty out there like this, so it doesn't matter which one I happen to pick on. I'll just call him Joe Realist. That is not his name. I'll just call him Joe Realist. 100,000 views on this 25-minute video where he did a fairly large, purdy picture. Now, there's a reason I'm telling you this story besides just sour grapes, which I hope it is not. But I want it to be illustrative of a couple things. One is, okay, first of all, I've already said, and I will stand by it, that human beings, in spite of what all professors say, snooty, snotty-nosed, elitist professors, in spite of what they say, human beings do actually get an authentic aesthetic buzz of pleasure by looking at realistic paintings. Okay, so again, and that puts me against Clement Greenberg and the whole kit and caboodle. Okay, all my professors. No, realism. You know. Detour. I actually had one of my the main art professor at the college I went to my last semester. I was doing soft sculpture, you know, because in college you do all kinds of stupid things that are largely worthless. Okay, but anyway, I was doing a fabric soft sculpture, and my main antagonist professor came walking down the hall, and he saw this, you know, several yards of canvas, and I was stitching it together in sort of cartoony style, traditional red thread shaped in like X's. Okay, so it was fun. It was visually fun, and he actually smiled quite widely when he saw what I was doing. This is just typical of the art establishment. And then, as he got closer, on second glance, he recognized that this big beanbag, essentially, was actually shaped like a human hand, kind of like a cartoon hand. And his smile instantly vanished and turned into a scowl. There's no question. He went from smile to scowl because in that moment, he discovered that I wasn't doing abstract soft sculpture, but I was actually doing representational. And his smile turned into a scowl. He already didn't like me. He was very disappointed when I came back to graduate because I had taken a semester off. I'm not kidding. He was very disappointed to see me walk through the door. He thought he had successfully ridded the art department of me. He did not like me because I was working really hard in the first half of life. Doggone it, I was trying to learn how to paint stuff that looked like stuff. Now, not very hard because I should have been working hard on that. As it was, I was just accidentally doing that all the time. Anyway, I digress. Now let's go back to, where was I? Oh yeah, so I was watching this young man on YouTube. I'll call him Joe Realist. And he was painting a purty picture. Purty. And I had my grandchildren with me by this time, and I had one under one arm and two under another arm. Their ages 3, 5, 7, and 9 now. And I was trying to explain to them why this was a pretty picture, nothing wrong with it, but it was not a good painting. So I'm trying to bend their twigs early. And big sunset, glorious sunset, beautiful Rocky Mountains, beautiful lake, beautiful trees, and a grizzly bear in the foreground. Kind of lost in the shadows a little bit. Pretty picture, really nothing wrong with the picture and nothing wrong with painting like that, except he did the entire thing, and I've got another point here. He did almost the entire thing with a brush about this big, and he was going like this the entire time. It was like a 30 by 40 inch painting, and he was going like this. He painted the entire thing like this. And here's the tragic. He had a carpal tunnel brace around his wrist, and he looked to me like he was still in his 20s. It's like, oh my goodness, here's a young man in his 20s that is actually doing damage to his body by painting poorly. I've been thinking about sending him an email, looking him up, Googling him, and saying, my dear friend, you can ignore this as the ravings of a crazy old artist if you want to, but run for your life. I doubt very much. I mean, he would look at my video, at my page, and see that I have mere, whatever it is, 50, 60,000 subscribers. He would say, you ain't nothing, old man. So there you go. Truly tragic. My heart went, oh, ouch, that hurts. All right. I've been ranting and raving all over the map. I'm going to call that done. I like the overall cast. I'm going to stop this and come back in a little while with another broadcast where I'm going to talk about fixing figures. So as you that's another one, the portraits, but these abstract figures to the left and to the right. That's a separate broadcast, so watch that if you want to. That'll be a completely different subject. But you guys have been chatting away down here. Let me do you the honor of looking and seeing what you guys have been saying, and pull up a chair. See if I'm still in the camera. Oh, yeah, I guess I am barely. Wow, lots of good chats. Eric, nice to have you here. Vista, you're a new commenter. Thank you for making a comment. Just came from a cross-hatching video of yours from 6 years ago. That's fun. You just came from my cross-hatching video. That's fun. Welcome. Yeah, thanks, Eric. Thanks for welcoming him. Uncle 60 says I should be a Mason. Eric, correct. When you paint your whole life, you should learn something. I agree. Thank you, Eric, for that vote of confidence. That's fun. You just came from my cross-hatching video. I appreciate that. Way to go, Eric. Are you same age as me, buddy? Good for you, man. Good for you. Well, painting is good. No matter how good you get, quote unquote, it's all good for you. That's one thing. Plus, everything that you produce, I've got a new revelation in me. I don't have the perfect words, but I've come to realize that no matter how, quote unquote, how bad a painting is, at least I derive a pleasure from it, and I think most people do. I know this to be true, because we recognize the humanity in that struggle, in that effort. And that is, we recognize the work, and that is, again, a kind of pleasure, aesthetic pleasure that we get. Uncle 60 asks a very good question about Michael Carder. For you new people, that's C-A-R-D-D-E-R, Carder, painting of President Bush. His are definitely not hyper-realism, but very realism. And yes, it's funny you should mention, keep watching, if you've watched all Mark Carter's stuff, he says it can all be learned. And ironically, the way he paints and the way he teaches, he can in fact teach people to render the way he renders. It's very mechanical, very measurably, brilliant, go for it, do it. So ironic you should ask the question of Mark Carter, because he's one of those that says, I can teach anybody to do this, therefore anybody can do this. Now, I've been watching Mark for several years now, and the one thing he does not recognize, which is funny to me, is he truly says, I can teach anybody to do this. He doesn't recognize that the word I is the pivotal issue in that sentence. He can, in fact, he's an extremely gifted teacher in that he teaches a very mechanical, specific, measurely. Anyway, but can anybody learn how to paint? No. I mean, if you hold a gun to their head, I'm sure over years they could learn a lot. But could I learn, so to speak, could I learn to be a good accountant? Yes, if there was a gun to my head to save my life, I could, but I would hate every minute of it. No. In other words, no. Can everybody learn everything? Are all human beings the same? No. Some are good and some are not. So Mark kind of disagrees. I disagree with him about this. He's like, no, anybody can learn how to do this. What he doesn't realize is that he has a method of teaching that he can create, in a sense, this is overly harsh, but he can create monkeys. He can create imitators of himself. And that's brilliant. I'm not denouncing that. But part of the key there is his teaching technique and his teaching method. So funny you should ask that question about Mark Carter in particular. Cause is telling Uncle Seth, I need to look for this girl named Taz who creates fake pop-up gallery. That is, oh my goodness, she names her gallery the Bulgarian word for prank. That is hilarious, Cause. I'm going to look that up. Thank you, Eric, for the truth. I mean, for the encouragement. I just read your word truth. Thank you. Benji, good to hear you, hear you on this broadcast today. May the Schwartz be. Reference to Spaceballs. Again, forgive me. Like, I'm really embarrassed. Turned it off before my wife came home and found me watching Spaceballs. 39 years of good impression down the drain. I realized, I saw it on Netflix, and I thought, you know what? I've never seen the beginning of Spaceballs. I've seen, bits and pieces of it many times through the years. Never seen it from the beginning. Anyway. Okay, what is art? That's right. That's a rant coming up sometime in the future. Uncle 60, you're exactly right. Eric, you're right. That poor young man, it really made me sad. I would say broke my heart. This, like an old man, being overly exaggerated, but yeah, it made me sad. Hello, Uzumaki Norato. I take it you're Japanese. Good to have you on board. And Sharon London, good to have you as well. All right, so that's the end of this broadcast. Thank you so much. I'll be back in just a little while talking about figures. Thanks for watching. Bye-bye.